in another countryside, kind of a state, if you will. And why do I keep saying if you will? It's like a new phrase I've picked up. And I thought, you know what? I want to shout from the mountaintops how much I love her books, because I do. Oh, and did I mention this is my favorite Ruth Ware book? Spoiler alert. Hi everybody, it's Audrey and welcome back to Chapter and Converse. Today's video is going to be an author spotlight, which is something I haven't done in a really long time, and I was doing when I had first started my channel. But I just finished reading One by One by Ruth Ware, and I was talking to some friends of mine and I was like, I just love her books. And then I was like, ding dong, why don't you do a video and tell everybody why you love her books? So that's what we're going to do today. So I do think there's something for everyone, and she has 6 books. They're all standalones. You can start anywhere, and whether you're sort of a classic mystery, whether you like dual timelines, complicated female friendships, houses playing tricks on you, dark and gothic-y atmosphere, just messed up people doing messed up things, or regular people getting stuck in extraordinary circumstances, fighting for their lives and trying to stay alive, there is something for you in a Ruth Ware book. So I'm going to talk about her books in publication order because that is the way that I bought them and that's the way that I read them. And I discovered her when In a Dark, Dark Wood came out, picked it up, loved it, and it's basically been a complete love fest from the start, with one small exception. So where it all began is In a Dark, Dark Wood, and this is an isolated thriller about a group of girls who go to a hen party weekend at this amazing glass house in the middle of the woods, and somebody dies. And we get 2 different timelines in this. And our main character, her name's Leonora. So some people call her Lee, some people call her Nora. And Nora wakes up in the hospital 48 hours later, and it says, like, she doesn't wake up wondering what happened, she wakes up wondering, what did I do? And she can't remember because there's a lot of drinking, there was a lot of partying, there's a lot of craziness going on, and she knows something's not right because she's in the hospital and there's a cop stationed outside of her door. So we go back and forth in timelines trying to piece together this insane event, trying to piece together the relationships between these girls, which were a group of girls that were friends from college, but there was some, you know, issues over the years as things tend to happen. So they're not all totally jazzed to be back together. And I just loved it. I fell in love with her writing. This is such a trope I love. I am all down with the isolated mystery, just the dynamics between the girls, all of it. I love books that explore just the complicated relationship between friends, and I love when you get a reunion of friends back together again and sort of all those old little animosities and things that grow between them. And it just hit all the spots for me. And I was watching a recent interview with Ruth Ware, and she was talking about how kind of what she had in mind when she was writing this book was more of like a Wes Craven style Killer in the Woods, Scream type of story. And I love it. I love that idea. And what's like, so many things about this are creepy, but they are in this glass house in the middle of the woods. And it's that idea of you kind of can't see out at night because you look through the glass and all you see is darkness, but somebody can see in, and somebody could be watching you, and who's out there and what's going on. Oh, it's just so wonderfully creepy. So like I said, I just fell in love with her from the start. I thought this was such a great book. So I think if you like those isolated mysteries, I think kind of like Lucy Foley Hunting Party. So you have this dynamic between the group of friends who've known each other for a while. This is all the girls because it is a hen party weekend, but it really just explores sort of those complicated relationships between the women. And then you throw in a murder at the beginning, or you know of a murder at the beginning, I should say, and you're not quite sure what happened. So again, dual timelines, trope I love, and just sort of, you know, dark and messed up people doing dark and messed up things. So next up is The Woman in Cabin 10. And I feel like this is the book that really kind of catapulted her into sort of a, you know, household name, if you will. And this book takes place on this luxury cruise, and our main character, Lo, is a travel writer and journalist, and her boss was supposed to go on this cruise, which is sort of just like the first time the boat is out, and they invite sort of like a whole bunch of important people to come on it so they can write about how fabulous it is. And Lo's boss can't go, so she winds up sort of scoring the plum invite. And everything seems great from the beginning. She's on this super posh boat with these super fancy people, and the cabins are beautiful, and the trip is going great, and life is good, and she's just happy to be there. And then, I don't know if it's the first night or the second night, but she kind of hears something going on in the cabin next door, and she's kind of trying to look out her balcony, and she thinks she kind of sees and hears someone getting thrown overboard. But when she reports this to the captain, he tells her that no one was staying in that room, and they look around and none of the guests are missing. So did Lois see something? Was there a woman in cabin 10? Like, what is going on here? And it kind of unravels from there. And this is, you know, kind of that Agatha Christie-ish type of isolated thriller. Again, you know, they're on this boat, so you introduce the fact that obviously, like, Wi-Fi is not great, cell phones aren't great, you're kind of out in the middle of nowhere, you're super trapped, and you know somebody on the boat is responsible if something sinister actually happened. And my feeling on this book, so this is a book that I felt like so many people were just raving and raving and raving about, and I was super excited for it. And it started off really great for me, and I loved the atmosphere, I loved the setting on the boat, I love Agatha Christie, I love all of those feels. And it sort of just took a weird turn for me. So I didn't love the ending of this book. And of all of her books, it's weird. I feel like people either like love it or don't. This is like the one I would recommend the least. So I feel like maybe if you're not so familiar with the genre, or maybe you just kind of want to like go in and test the waters, no pun intended, try it, because it's definitely a book that's for some but not all. It just didn't strike the chord with me. So I didn't love the ending of it. It definitely impacted my overall feeling of the book, but I liked the start of it. And this is a book, I read it when it first came out, which was, I think, 2016. It's been a while. I almost kind of want to reread it and see if my feelings have changed. Yeah, 2016. And kind of see if my perspective is different on it. And I do feel like there's always sort of a second book pressure for a lot of authors. And I don't know if there was a pressure to kind of go over the top, or, you know, kind of have like a surprise ending and have that like, oh, I didn't see that coming kind of an ending. So I don't know. I do feel like maybe this is one I should revisit, but this is book number 2, and it is Murder on the Ocean. The Lying Game is about 4 best friends who went to boarding school together, but it was kind of like a B-list British boarding school in the English countryside. So it's not where all the fabulous people go, but they were the best of friends back then and kind of got themselves into all sorts of trouble. And we fast forward to present day, and one of the girls, Kate, sends a text message to the other 3 girls like in the middle of the night, and it literally just says, "I need you." And with no further explanation, and the fact that years have gone by since they have all been together or spoken to each other, they all know, and they just basically drop what they're doing and go and reconvene, because something that happened back in the day has just come back to haunt all of them. This book is the dual timelines. We sort of build up from whatever it is in the past that has come back to haunt these girls, and it's kind of like a testament to their friendship of the lengths they will go to protect each other and to protect themselves and the lives that they've all established, because I want to say like 20 years have passed. I don't even know if it says, but they've all moved on, and some of them are married with children, some of them have great careers. They all have a lot to lose if this secret from back in the day comes out. And it's kind of like one of those things, you know, don't want to give anything away, but we've got this small town, we've got these girls kind of forced to sort of revisit. So it's not so much sort of one of my favorite tropes of like the hero who's forced to reluctantly return to their hometown, but in a way they are, because they have to revisit. This town is where the boarding school was, it's where Kate lives, and they've got to confront what happened back then. So you do get a lot of the past influencing the present, and a lot of resistance on the part of our characters for being there. And then we see the ripple effects of them choosing to be there and what it does to their families and the rest of their lives. And I always love these books that have these relationships between the girls. I particularly love when people were friends in the past and they have a reunion for some reason in the present. It's one of the favorite things about In the Dark, Dark Wood, but kind of who the people were in the past and how that that assumption is that's still who you are, and how people can kind of only see you for who you used to be. And the dynamics between girls and the dynamics between women is always really complicated and can always be really interesting to me. And I liked seeing very much who the girls were back in the day versus who they are now, and how they sort of can't see each other any differently than like the people they knew. And you know, sometimes it's trying to prove yourself and how you've changed and how you're different, or trying to kind of break free of how people always used to see you and what people think of you. So I enjoyed this one. It definitely is not really talked about as much. I feel like people don't talk about this one as much as the other books do. I almost feel like it fell a little bit under the radar, but I like these past and presents. And you know, I feel like every time you're always going to get someone reviewing a book who's like, oh, I could see it coming, or oh, it was so this or that or the other thing. But I enjoyed the mystery. There were definitely some things that I could sort of see happening, like you were like, oof, like that part's probably not going to end well. But it didn't diminish my enjoyment of it. It didn't diminish my experience with the book. And again, I really like how she draws her characters and how she draws her relationships. So clearly, I'm a fan. Next up, we have The Death of Mrs. Westaway. And this is where I got to meet Ruth Ware. It's my tarot card. If you've read this, you know that tarot is a thing in it. And this was my first author reading with her, and hopefully not my last, but I got her to sign my book. Love it. Love author events. And this was interesting in the sense that when she was talking about the book at this reading, she talked about how in her first 3 books, you sort of had ordinary women who were put in kind of these extraordinary situations, and that, you know, you go to a hen party and somebody gets murdered, and you go on a cruise ship to write a travel story and you think somebody got thrown off the boat. And in The Lying Game, you've got these girls who something bad happened to them in the past that comes back to haunt them in the present. But in The Death of Mrs. Westaway, which is more of an homage to Rebecca and Daphne du Maurier, where you've got this gothic dark setting and this estate that plays a huge sort of factor and sort of is a character in and of itself. We have Hal, who is, she's kind of a tarot card reader, but she doesn't totally believe in it. So she really is like a people reader. But her mom used to read tarot cards, and she doesn't have a lot of money, so she's got this kind of little shop down on the pier, but she's got bills up to her eyeballs, and she's all alone in the world, and she just is like really falling on hard times. And she gets this letter in the mail that her grandmother has died and left her all this money. But Hal knows that she doesn't have a grandmother, and that the letter is not actually intended for her. But she's so desperate, she makes the decision to pretend that she is. And she goes and she meets the family, and she sort of lines herself up to get this inheritance. So the difference that Ruth Ware talked about in this book versus her others is we have a character who puts herself voluntarily into the situation, and then this is what happens to her. And poor Hal she's desperate, and she goes in and just kind of wants to figure out what it's all about with this family. And what she doesn't expect to have happen is to actually start to care about these people. But also these people are like kind of super suspicious of her, because it's like, where have you been all this time? Like, why don't we know about you? Why haven't we met before? And she kind of leverages her skills of being able to read people, and we see these relationships start to evolve. We see who's questioning her. We see her try and fit in, and sort of what it starts to do to her personally as she's duping all of these people that she's starting to care about. So what I loved about this book was so much of it was the atmosphere of it was just so well written, definitely dark and creepy. If you guys watch my 5-star prediction video, you know Rebecca is on my list. I mean, hello, last girl on the planet to not read Rebecca. But of course you can imagine that not only does Hal have like extreme guilt over the fact that she's starting to care about these people, but she's also very quickly figuring out that something isn't quite right at this house and with this family. And this is the story of what happens when she starts to look into it. So I really enjoyed this book. I thought it was really well written. I thought that, again, the atmosphere was great. I really liked the idea of Hal being the person who inserted herself into the situation. So this is definitely kind of twisty-turny, psychological thriller-ish, really so much about the characters. And I think if you like those kind of dark gothic-y books, this will be a great one for you. And again, sort of her own free will is what inserts her into that situation. So it's much different than someone who's just sort of fighting for survival when they're locked on a boat. It is someone who intentionally put themselves in a dangerous situation and how they try and get their way out of it. So the next up is The Turn of the Key. And in this one, which is her nod to Henry James' The Turn of the Screw, which I haven't read, but if you have, maybe that helps you understand what this is about, is about a nanny named Rowan. And she takes this job working for this family in the Scottish Highlands. And it's these two girls, and the husband and wife are architects. And they have taken this beautiful estate again and turned it into a smart house. So there's cameras and there's voice activation and there's just all these systems that control everything from your blinds to your lights and everything in between. But there's also a degree of kind of like, I would say, sort of gothic, dark sort of atmosphere going on as well. And it seems like the perfect gig, doesn't it always? And she takes it and off she goes. And then, you know, the girls are not as well behaved as she thought they were, and the parents aren't really around the way she thought they would be. And the house kind of starts playing tricks on her. And once again, it's clear something is not quite right. So this book opens with Rowan writing a letter to a solicitor. And the last line of the letter she writes is, "And I didn't kill that child." So we know out of the gate, somebody's dead. And I really enjoyed this book. So I wasn't familiar, like I said, with The Turn of the Screw. So this was kind of like all new to me. And not that it's a remake of that in any kind of a way, but there definitely is that feeling, kind of like in the Riley Sager sense of like, is there something supernatural happening here? Is there a plausible explanation for all of this? And as this smart house kind of goes crazy on Rowan and she's left alone with these girls for weeks at a time, she's starting to wonder, like, is she losing her mind? Is it her? You know, is she imagining these things? Are they really happening? And it's just basically driving her to the edge of the cliff, so to speak. And we've got this handyman, gardener, Jack. I'm trying to think, like, what's his real purpose other than to give her someone adult to be around with? Yeah, the handyman, enigmatic handyman Jack. And, you know, we know from the start that she's in prison and she's, you know, she's like, I didn't kill that child. And this entire book is basically told in one giant letter to the solicitor explaining what happened. So we go backwards in time, but it's told through the letter to her. So you're really like in it personally with Rowan. And I really enjoyed it. I thought it was fun, twisty-turny, had me guessing, wasn't quite sure where things were going. And I like to see, even though it's another sort of isolated mystery in the sense that she's kind of stuck at this house in the Scottish Highlands, it's not, we're here for 48 hours and people are getting picked off, but it's sort of a different feeling of that isolation that takes place. And then for the grand finale, we have a total isolation mystery with an avalanche, and it's freezing cold, and they are stuck at a chalet with a bunch of people that they work with, and people start getting picked off one by one. And this was everything I wanted right now. It is winter, it's cold outside, it's snowing, and this book, like, this will make you like grab a blanket because it just gives you such cold feelings to it. And this book is about a group of work colleagues from a startup, and it's this app called Snoop, which is a music app. And they have been kind of made this offer they can't refuse to sell the app and make billions and billions of dollars. But some of the founders are totally down for selling it, and some of them are like, no, we want to keep our company and turn it public. So they are basically debating what to do during this retreat. And there are 5 people in the company that hold stock, and there is one person who is holding the deciding vote, and her name is Liz. And we see Liz's point of view, and then we get the point of view of a woman named Erin, who is someone who works at the chalet along with Danny, who is the chef. And everything starts out pretty good in the sense that, like, they're at this beautiful place and they're gonna go skiing, and it's just this, you know, wonderful, wonderful, there's a pool, it's a wonderful place to be. And then the avalanche hits, and one of the Snoop work employees goes missing. And then it just goes from bad to worse with the avalanche because they are stuck, and there is no Wi-Fi, and there is no cell phone, and there is no help coming. And things really start to get messed up. and people are fearing for their lives. And I loved it. I loved every bit of it. I loved the multiple perspectives. I really, really loved Aaron and Danny's relationship. So they are the work colleagues at the chalet. And then this group from Snoop is like this ridiculous, pompous, like just, all the things. And it's just these people who are just so entitled and are just expect people to kind of like do things for them. And they're just so just snooty and ridiculous. And the book opens with like a bio of each of the people, and listening to this interview with Ruth Ware, like she was like, I just wanted to make them just like these unlikable kind of ridiculous people that you would expect them to be, and they are. And I just loved this book. Like it was just what I needed. It's sort of that very classic literal isolated mystery. It is not, I've heard lots of comparisons to And Then There Were None, and I feel like even I said it because I had heard other people say it, but it's not like that at all, other than the fact that they're just isolated and stuck somewhere. But that's a lot of books, and that's kind of the whole isolated trope mystery anyway. But it's not like they're not brought there for the same reasons as And Then There Were None, and it's not the same story in any stretch of the imagination, other than that it's an isolated place and people die. So lots of books do that. But I just really enjoyed it. And there's just something about the ever-growing tension and the ever-growing feeling of like more things are taken away from you, whether it's the access to the outside world or the technology, or the avalanche hits, and how it affects electricity and how it affects any kind of communication, and how it just starts to kind of slowly drive people insane when you feel like a rat in a maze. And I loved it. I loved every little bit of it. So I think if you like the classic isolated mystery, this is definitely a great one to give a go to. And the beginning of this book has kind of like a BBC News report that's the aftermath of the avalanche, and it talks about how 4 people were found dead. So you know from the start that people are not going to survive. And as sort of the tension mounts and the book goes on, you're wondering who's going to be next. They're wondering who's going to be next. You're wondering who's behind it, because it's got to be somebody in the house, because they're all trapped there together. So it hit every single part of tropes I love, feelings I love, exactly what I wanted. And I'm a big fan. So I would say if you love that like creepy in the woods, just complicated relationships between the friends in a dark, dark wood is great. If you love that super classic isolated mystery feeling of just being trapped somewhere, literally one by one, is great. If you are more of a gothic, atmospheric person, I would say The Death of Mrs. Westaway. And if you love sort of that supernatural thriller, dancing the line, Riley Sager style, I think The Turn of the Key would be a great one for you to give a go to. And The Lying Game, we've got the dual perspectives, we've got that twinge of boarding school in there, we've got the secrets from the past feeding secrets from the present. And then, if you like sort of that classic Agatha Christie, on the boat, Woman in Cabin 10, again, the ending of it just didn't resonate with me, and it did impact my opinion of it, but there is an entire universe of people out there that absolutely adore this book. So go all in. And if that's your favorite of them all, let me know down below. And if you guys have read these, if you're a Ruth Ware fan, I would love to know what your favorite is, period. And we can just talk about my love fest of Ruth Ware, because she is an auto-buy author for me. She is a go-to for me, and I will just rave about her till the cows come home. So thank you guys for watching today and hanging out for a bit, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye everybody.